Wow, what a year 2024 was. I can't say thank you enough to each and every one of you, whether you were new to the channel here in 2024 or have been with me from the very beginning all the way back to 2017. Again, I'm truly thankful. I say thank you to each and every one of you. With that being said, what do you say we put a wrap on 2024 and take a look at my top 5 bourbons or whiskeys of 2024? All right, so we are putting a wrap here on 2024. We've all had an opportunity to taste and try a lot of great whiskeys throughout the year. This is always a video that I look forward to doing really each and every year. It gives you an opportunity to kind of sit down, break down a few things, and add those kind of special whiskeys to each of us individually that kind of were a highlight or really stood out for the year. So I've gone ahead and put together basically an honorable mention along with my kind of top 5. And the reason a few of these will be in the honorable mention section is not that they're not worthy of being in number 5. One of the criteria I try to set is to actually have a bottle of that whiskey. And within this list, as you're going to see, there were some bottles that I just didn't get throughout the year. So obviously, I'm not going to include those in my top 5 officially. If I got a sample, whether it was a media sample or whatever it may be, I may add those as the honorable mention. And that way it gives them an inclusion into this video. And rightfully so, because a few of these honorable mentions are 100% worthy of being within that top 5. Again, I just didn't have a physical bottle that I like to have as part of that criteria. So rather than waste any more time, let's go ahead and kind of dive into my first list, which is going to be the honorable mentions. All right, honorable mention number 1, Kluke Batch 10. This guy was coming in at 120.2 proof. Again, batch 10. This is blends of high and low rye, Indiana and Kentucky bourbons. And it is one of the bottles here in 2024 that I regret not actually buying. I waited too long. They were all gone. So I had to somehow get this thing on the list. And in my opinion, it was probably worthy of being at least in that top 5. But I only had at this point a media sample. So again, coming in the honorable mention in no particular order is from Kluke, their batch 10. Let's move on to one of the next honorable mentions. Now from Ben Holiday Distillery, this is their Ancient Cave collection. Now this is typically a distillery only, but it really made a memorable type of experience for me. Now this was a bottle that was aged in French oak, heavy toast, a char number 1. So this had some really interesting profiles that is not something that I found, I should say, very often. It was a very unique profile, absolutely delicious. And I had to have this again as an honorable mention. It did come in the 375 milliliter, which is the bottles that they released this in. But again, I had to get this in the Ancient Cave collection from Ben Holiday. Let's go ahead and move on to another honorable mention. Limestone Farms. This was new to me towards the end of the year. Kind of jumped on a live stream with Marty from Whiskey Knows. We went through a lot of these blind. They did send us several of these samples to a lot of us within the whiskey community. Got to try this, and what an absolutely delicious bourbon this was. So again, this was a Kentucky straight bourbon from Limestone Branch. Absolutely fantastic. I believe the MSRP on this was right around $160, $175. But again, I wanted to get this in there to kind of highlight a newer brand here that's kind of been introduced to us again here in 2024, but an absolutely delicious bourbon from Limestone Farm. Another honorable mention comes from our friends over at Heaven Hill, and this is the Bernheim Wheat Cask Strength Wheat Whiskey. I'll tell you what, it may be my favorite all-time wheat whiskey. What they did with this B batch, in my opinion, was absolutely amazing. I loved, and probably would have worked its way into my top 5, definitely probably into a top 10. but I absolutely loved this Bernheim wheat whiskey, their barrel proof version. Again, this thing came in at like 122 proof, something along those lines, but an absolutely delicious wheat whiskey. This here is proof that wheat whiskeys can be absolutely delicious. It's just a matter of maybe tasting through a few other ones, but I got to this one and absolutely loved it. Now let's go ahead and move on to my final honorable mention of 2024. All right, like I said, final honorable mention, bourbon here in 2024 goes to the 20-year single barrel bourbon that was done by Watch Hill Proper in Louisville, Kentucky. This thing may, in all honesty, if I had a bottle, could definitely have been a #1 bourbon of the year. Again, there were so few of these things that A, they were very expensive, and B, were very, very difficult to find. Just know that it was so good that this probably could have been a bourbon of the year, definitely in the top 3, if not 2 or 1, but an absolutely incredible 20-year single barrel bourbon from Watch Hill Proper. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my top 5 bourbons or whiskeys here in 2024. All right, so as you can see, coming in at number 5, Booker's The Reserves. This was a bourbon that I got close to about August, September of 2024. So I got this a little bit later in the game while I was in Kentucky. I got this directly from the Jim Beam distillery. And I'll say this, in my opinion, this is maybe outside of like the Booker's Rye or something along those lines, or maybe even Booker's 25. This may be my all-time favorite Booker's. And admittedly, I'm not a huge Booker's fan because of how hot they generally drink. This seemed to be in a completely different category. Now, this was made up of several different bourbons from different rick houses, ranged anywhere from about 8 years, 2 months, all the way up to almost 14 and a half years within this blend to create, again, Booker's The Reserves 2024. If you are somebody who enjoys, generally speaking, the Booker's profile, but I'm going to say ×2 or ×3, and really loves that kind of maybe chocolate malt or like a malt ball kind of taste profile, along with that rich kind of complex fruit notes, very, very well balanced. You will absolutely love Booker's The Reserves 2024, and it's why it's my number 5 bourbon of the year. All right, so here you can see at my number 4 whiskey of the year goes to Found North and the Helldiver. This was their Canadian whiskey that they then aged in sherry and cognac and new charred oak. And what this thing does, again, it's just a testament to what it is that Nick and his team do at Found North. Just absolutely incredible whiskeys. And this may be one of the most mouth-coating, viscous whiskeys I've ever tasted. Blending both of the cognac, the sherry, along with that new wood kind of influencing all of this, just made this an incredibly well-balanced, viscous, enjoyable whiskey. And again, Found North seems to find their way on this list or a list every single year. And again, this is just a tribute to what it is that they're doing and why it's my number 4 whiskey of the year in 2024. Now my number 3 bourbon of 2024 goes to 13th Colony and their cask strength bourbon. This was their very first release in a cask strength version to the, I'll say, general public. Now, again, admittedly, it wasn't the easiest bottle to come across, but what an absolutely delicious whiskey. We've all tried, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of us have gotten to try the double oak. And that was really what kind of put 13th Colony, going back a few years ago, kind of on the map. Well, they finally decided to release their own cask strength, or their first edition or first release of their cask strength bourbon. And in my opinion, they absolutely hit it out of the park with this. If you're a fan of the double oak, I think this is just kind of a lighter version of that, if that makes any sense. But what it is that 13th Colony does with their whiskeys is absolutely amazing. The heat, their kind of attention to detail, everything that they've got going for them down there in Americus, Georgia is absolutely fantastic. And how this kind of turned out, and Graham and his team, Max, everybody there, I think they did an absolutely fantastic job of blending this and releasing this when they did. It just hit every single mark from my standpoint that I enjoy about a bourbon. And really what I love about 13th Colony is it does give you that slight different profile. You are getting a little bit of the terroir, something that has to do with the barrels aging down there in Georgia to create what it is they do. It gives you a slightly different profile. But again, if you've had even their regular or standard 13th Colony bourbon, it's absolutely amazing. So I can't say enough about this and why it's my number 3 bourbon in 2024. My number 2 bourbon of 2024 goes to my good friends Bill and Bobby at Foregate. This being their Kelvin Collaboration 6. And I think what they always continue to do with this Kelvin Collaboration release every single year just continues to hit it out of the park. They know that. I've expressed it to them along with a lot of other people as well. But what the Kelvin Collaboration 6 was, straight bourbon whiskey that was finished in a Portuguese Madeira cask along with the Coke Republic dark rum, which is down in the Florida Keys. All of that blended, put into this cask, this single cask. It just turned out amazing. As you can see, I've got nothing left. It is completely gone, and it was enjoyed by not only myself, a lot of other friends, family, whatever it may be. But what they did with the Kelvin Collaboration 6, in my opinion, it's maybe one of their best. I find myself saying that every single year because they just are. And I think they continue to kind of ramp it up. What they've really been able to do is get their hands on some, first and foremost, terrific whiskey that they're then able to age in even better finishing casks. They spare no expense when it comes to the finishing portion, which is 100% a reason why some of their finished whiskeys or bourbons can be as good as they are. When you've got nothing but quality in, it's quality out. Their attention to detail is what continues to allow these Kelvin collaborations to be on my top 5 bourbons of the year, and it's why it's my number 2 bourbon of 2024. Now, the very anticipated number 1 bourbon of the year. It is a 15-year bourbon, but it may not be exactly which one you think. Let's go ahead and take a look at my number 1 bourbon of the year. So here we are. My number 1 bourbon of the year goes to Seal Box Private Reserve 15-year Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Now, this bottle you see here is my unopened bottle. I did have another that was basically polished off with a lot of other friends. I was also able to taste this probably about August or September of 2024, and it was immediate. I knew that what that profile was right in my wheelhouse of it being worthy of a bourbon of the year. I didn't know it was necessarily going to be my number 1 at the time, but just after tasting a lot of other things, what it is that Blake and his team did or secured these barrels that they then blended to create this 15-year private reserve, again, under their own label, was, in my opinion, absolute magic. I loved everything from that very first sip to the very last sip. The balance, the complexity, the finish, it checked every single box. Now, I know there weren't, unfortunately, a lot of people that were able to get their hands on this particular bottle. They just recently here in December released their batch number 2, which I've not had a chance to get yet. I did have a small sample, but it was so little that I really wasn't able to formulate a true opinion. So I'm holding out to either get a bottle or find another sample of batch number 2. But for what batch number 1 was and is, if you were one of the lucky ones that were able to get a bottle, you know, congratulations. It is an absolute masterpiece of a bourbon. I love that age. It's not over oaked. Like I said before, the balance, the richness, the complexity, the finish, it all worked perfectly. Thus, it's my 2024 Bourbon of the Year. So congratulations to Blake and his team for releasing the Private Reserve 15-year, absolutely beautiful whiskey. Can't say enough about it. So there you go, guys. There were my 5 and honorable mention bourbons of 2024. Now it's your turn. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment below on some of these. Again, I know they're not all totally readily available, and that's not always the criteria. I want to try to get in what is the most memorable, but not have it totally completely allocated where you can never get any of these things. Just to put a little bit of effort into whatever it is we all do within the community. It's what allows us the opportunity or ability to find a few of these. If there were some bourbons that were not on the list, it's only because I either didn't have a bottle or haven't even had a chance to try it. Russell's 15, I had a small little sample of it, but never got anything. I did have the most recent Discovery series from Bardstown, which was absolutely amazing, but I never ended up getting a bottle. I thought I did, and it probably should have been, but I don't actually have a bottle to even, or a sample to even include within my honorable mention. So I didn't include it, but it definitely could have been on there. So there you go. There are my 5 and honorable mention bourbons of 2024. So I want to say thank you to everybody. I also want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon community, in addition to the YouTube community. To the patrons, to you guys, thank you so much for all of your continued support with the channel, with the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club. You guys make it an absolutely special community to be involved in. So if that's something you're looking to get into or maybe try in 2025, make sure you check out that link in the description below. That will direct you to the Patreon page, which will allow you to, again, not only support the channel, but become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club and the Mash and Journey family. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for everything. I truly, truly am blessed. I can't say thank you enough for everything. So there you have it. There are my 5 and honorable mention bourbons of 2024. Now on to 2025, and I can't wait to see what that's going to be. Also, one quick thing, if you're looking for my top 5 and maybe honorable mention rye whiskeys of 2024, check here if it's already been released. If not, it's coming to you soon. Guys, thanks again, and remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers, we'll see you in 2025.